Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
You know how every family has that one person they all hold up like a damn trophy? That was my sister, Jessica. From the day we could both tie our shoes, she was the shiny one, high school prom queen, valedictorian, president of every club, all of that overachiever crap. And me? I was the weird kid in the back with paint on my hands and duct tape stuck to my jeans, building dream catchers and clay frogs. They called it a phase back then, but I just never grew out of it. Jessica went to college on a full ride, studied business, married her high school sweetheart, and opened a boutique downtown that sold overpriced candles and pastel throw pillows with words like inhale and exhale embroidered in gold thread. Her life looked like a damn Instagram ad. Mine? Not so much. I went to community college for a while, worked 3 dead-end jobs, got laid off twice, and ended up living in a crappy 2-bedroom with a roommate who once boiled hot dogs in the coffee maker. But you know what stung the most? It wasn't the success itself. It was how Jessica wore her success like a damn badge of honor while treating the rest of us like we were part of some charity program she volunteered for. Every family dinner turned into a performance. She'd bring these massive trays of macarons from some bakery no one could afford and go on about her branding strategies and quarterly revenue spikes like she was giving a TED Talk. Our parents, George and Linda, would sit there nodding like bobbleheads, sipping their wine and beaming like she'd cured cancer. And then there was me, still single, still renting, still working at the bookstore and doing my little crafts, as they loved to call them. They didn't know I was dying inside every time Jessica looked at me like I was playing grown-up with glitter glue. The worst moment? Christmas, 4 years ago. She got me a self-help book with the title, You Are a Badass at Making Money. No joke. Wrapped it in gold paper and said, I thought this might help you since you know. Etsy. I laughed because what the hell else could I do? Cry into the turkey? But the truth is, she lit a fire under my ass. Not out of support, not even out of rivalry, but out of that cold, bitter disbelief that I would always be seen as the joke, the disappointment, the messy one who never figured it out. So I started small. I listed 5 handmade leather journals I'd stitched myself. Nothing fancy. The photos were garbage. I had no clue what I was doing. I made $29 that month. My roommate bought 2 just to be nice. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not Jessica, not even my friends. I just kept going. I stayed up late reading forums, watching YouTube videos about product photography and SEO and how to write descriptions that didn't sound like a damn garage sale ad. I worked weekends at the bookstore, poured every extra dollar into materials, and reinvested everything I made. It was slow. God, it was slow. There were nights I thought I was nuts for believing I could make this work. Meanwhile, Jessica's boutique was doing just fine. She posted boss babe selfies from inside her shop surrounded by velvet chairs and twinkle lights. My mom would share them on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of my daughter Jessica. She's such an inspiration." I wasn't even mentioned. I could have died, and they wouldn't have noticed for 2 weeks. Then came the turning point, the pandemic. Suddenly, people were stuck at home and bored out of their minds. Online shopping blew up. My journals, sketchbooks, and hand-bound photo albums started getting traction. I couldn't keep up with the orders. I had to close the shop twice just to catch up on inventory. I upgraded my equipment, bought a real camera, hired a part-time helper, all without telling a soul. And I remember the moment it hit me. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, packing an order for someone in Oregon when a notification popped up. I had a message on Etsy from a buyer in France. She wanted to order 5 custom journals for her wedding party. 5. In euros. I just sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking a little, because for the first time in my life I felt something I never really felt before: legitimacy. I wasn't just playing around anymore. I was running something real. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her message and thought about every time Jessica had called my work a cute little side hustle, every time she'd rolled her eyes when I mentioned having a shop. I thought about that self-help book and the patronizing grin on her face when she handed it to me. And I smiled. Not a big grin, not a laugh, but that quiet kind of smile you make when something shifts inside you. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was just the realization that I wasn't who they thought I was anymore. I was becoming someone else, someone they didn't see coming. And something told me that wasn't the last time I'd hear from France. It was strange how fast things shifted once the world hit pause, once the streets went quiet and people retreated behind their screens, refreshing tracking numbers and scrolling Etsy at 3 in the morning like it was a lifeline to something real. Suddenly, my little handmade journals weren't just charming, they were comforting, personal, and exactly the kind of thing that felt human when everything else felt like falling apart. Orders didn't just trickle in anymore, they poured, and I found myself working 14-hour days hunched over leather, binding wax thread, running to the post office with bags that left red grooves in my fingers. I had to shut down the shop temporarily in April just to breathe and rework my whole system. By June, I had 3 product lines, a backlog that kept me up at night, and a customer base that stretched from California to Sweden. I made about $12,000 in my 3rd month, which was double what I made in my whole first year, which was $5,000. I didn't tell anyone. Not my family. Not Jessica. Not even the friend group chat that had mostly devolved into sourdough updates and Tiger King memes. I liked the privacy of it. I liked watching the numbers grow in silence. There was something powerful about keeping it all close to the chest, about building something no one believed in and letting it speak for itself. By September, I was reading investment books between shipments. I subscribed to 3 newsletters and started sitting in on webinars about real estate syndications and passive income like some Wall Street reject in pajamas. I wasn't flashy about it, no Lamborghini dreams or private islands. I just knew I never wanted to feel powerless again. I never wanted to be the sister who got a condescending smile across the dinner table and a pat on the head like I'd brought finger paints to a board meeting. Jessica, of course, was still thriving or pretending to. Her boutique had reopened with fancy plexiglass dividers and color-coded shopping baskets, and she hosted a virtual fall fashion kickoff that featured a 20-minute IG live rant about how small businesses were the backbone of the economy, while she posed in a silk jumpsuit and sold $10 scrunchies to moms in the suburbs. My parents watched the whole thing like it was the goddamn Super Bowl. I stayed quiet, camera off, mic muted, crafting custom bookmarks for a bookstore in Oregon that had just placed their 2nd wholesale order. Then came Christmas. Zoom style. We did a virtual family call that started with Jessica walking through her boutique, camera in hand, doing a behind-the-scenes tour while she name-dropped local vendors and casually mentioned how hard it is managing inventory when you're also managing staff. My dad chuckled and told her she should write a book. My mom said she looked like she lost weight. And then, out of nowhere, Jessica asked me, "So Amanda, are you still gluing glitter on mugs or have you moved on to rhinestones?" She laughed at her own joke before anyone else could. My mom gave that soft, pitying smile, and my dad sipped his eggnog like maybe he didn't hear it. I just stared at the screen, still muted, still invisible, feeling that old familiar heat crawl up my neck. I could have said something. I could have thrown down my latest sales report or casually mentioned that I had just placed a bulk leather order big enough to supply a medieval reenactment convention. But I didn't. I smiled instead. Because I was already halfway gone, mentally and financially light years beyond that tiny Zoom box where she sat surrounded by pillows that read "Girl Boss" in Foro's gold thread. In early January, I joined a business mastermind group online, mostly e-commerce people, a few consultants, some drop shippers, a couple of Etsy sellers like me, and this guy named Mark. Mark was older, mid-50s maybe, with that calm, dry tone of someone who doesn't talk unless there's something worth saying. He had owned 3 coffee shops and sold 2 of them right before the pandemic. He also had this thing for buying small commercial properties, holding them long-term, and renting them to mom-and-pop shops trying to stay afloat. We connected almost immediately. I liked his no-bullshit approach. He liked that I wasn't trying to scale to the moon or sell motivational mugs with fake cursive. I told him about my Etsy shop, about how I'd quietly reinvested most of my earnings into a self-directed retirement account and was itching to try my hand at commercial property. He offered to mentor me a bit. By March, we were scouting listings together, virtually at first, then in person. I didn't tell my family about Mark. They'd have assumed it was romantic, and the truth was we were business partners with a shared love of spreadsheets and sarcasm. We joked about starting a coffee and leather hybrid shop just to mess with people. We never did, but we kept digging. And in late April, Mark sent me a listing that made my blood run cold. "You know that building on Main Street?" he asked. "The one with the boutique?" I did. It was Jessica's. "The owner's retiring. Wants out quick," he said. And I swear I didn't smile, not immediately. But there was this slow, quiet hum in my chest that I hadn't felt since that message from France. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even revenge. It was inevitability. For the first time in years, I stepped back into the family orbit, not because I missed them, not because I had some sudden surge of nostalgia or longing for warm Sunday dinners and polite small talk, but because I wanted to watch the pieces move in real time. I joined the group chat again, the same one I had muted 3 years ago after getting tired of daily Jessica updates and forced photo dumps of themed brunches no one had asked for. I started responding in measured doses, just enough to seem engaged, never enough to invite real conversation. I even laughed at my dad's corny memes and complimented my mom's seasonal porch decorations like I gave a damn. I was playing the long game now, and I knew exactly what I was doing. It started subtly. I'd ask how Jessica's boutique was doing, drop a line like "I saw the window display, super cute," or "love the color palette this month," just enough to sound supportive, not enough to raise suspicion. She ate it up, of course. Jessica had always needed an audience, even if that audience was the sister she used to call Little Miss Hot Glue Gun. Her confidence was still intact, but there were cracks if you looked close. Mentions of foot traffic being low, a new competitor opening down the street, a supply chain issue with a vendor she relied on. So one sunny Friday in May, I did something I hadn't done since the day she opened that damn place. I walked through the front door of her boutique like a customer. The bell chimed, soft and artificial, and Jessica looked up from behind the register wearing a loose linen blazer and oversized earrings that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Her expression flickered when she saw me, surprised but composed in that overly polished way people get when they're not sure whether to be threatened or amused. Well, she said with that half-laugh she always used when she was trying to sound amused but superior. "Look who finally decided to check out the grown-up world." I smiled, and not just politely. I made it soft, almost curious, like I was genuinely impressed. "This is amazing," I said, letting my eyes wander the space, past the hanging plants and minimalist shelving units. "It feels so curated." She lit up. God, she lit up. Jessica had always been hungry for validation, especially when it came from people who didn't usually hand it over. She started giving me a full tour, pointing out new products, talking about her summer expansion plan, even name-dropping a few influencers who had recently tagged her shop on Instagram. I asked questions I already knew the answers to, nodded in the right places, complimented the packaging design like it was a museum exhibit. And all the while, I was mentally calculating square footage, estimating inventory turnover, and smiling through the tightness in my chest that came with years of eating shit in silence. The building purchase went through that same week. Mark and I signed the paperwork in a small, unassuming office in town with stale coffee and a closing agent who didn't care who we were as long as the check cleared. It felt anticlimactic in the best possible way. There was no fanfare, no confetti, no dramatic declarations, just a signature, a firm handshake, and a folder full of keys and property documents that now had both our names printed clean and clear. Jessica was notified of her new landlord 2 days later. She sent a long, mildly passive-aggressive email to the leasing office, assuming it had been sold to some out-of-state investment group with no soul and even less interest in community roots. She asked for a phone call, suggested negotiating terms given the economic climate, and dropped hints about her loyal customer base and positive Yelp reviews. I said nothing. Mark handled it all with his usual calm precision, replying with neutral language, outlining the new payment structure, and thanking her for being a valued tenant. She didn't question a thing. Not yet. Then the text came in on a Wednesday afternoon. I was elbow-deep in packaging materials, taping up a wholesale order for a bookstore in Arizona when my phone buzzed. It was Mark. "She just tried to negotiate her rent," he wrote. "She doesn't know I'm with you." I stared at that message for a long moment, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't petty revenge. This wasn't a prank or some vindictive lashing out. This was a slow, calculated shift in the power dynamic that had governed our entire lives. And she didn't see it coming. The next day, my mom sent out a group message about the upcoming family reunion, something about finally being able to get everyone together after years of unprecedented times. I told her I'd be there, and that I'd be bringing someone. His name was Mark. I could practically hear the surprise in her thumbs-up emoji reply, probably wondering if I'd finally found a man with a real job or at least a full set of teeth. I didn't correct her assumptions. Let them build whatever narrative made them feel better. The countdown had officially started, and for once in my life, I wasn't dreading the reunion. I was looking forward to it. The family reunion was held in the same old park where we used to run around as kids, chasing ice cream trucks and getting grass stains on our knees while the grown-ups talked about mortgages and arthritis. It was all picnic tables and paper plates and folding chairs that looked like they'd survived at least 3 presidencies. Somebody brought a Bluetooth speaker blasting 80s classics, the kind of music our parents still called real songs, and there was enough potato salad to feed a small army. The whole thing was drenched in nostalgia and forced smiles, and I arrived with a bottle of sparkling water, a cooler full of artisan cookies, and Mark by my side. He wore jeans and a button-down, casual enough to blend in, but clean enough to make people wonder. That was the thing about Mark, he never had to try hard. He had that quiet, steady presence that made people instinctively pay attention without knowing why. I didn't introduce him as anything specific. Just Mark, a friend, and left it hanging there like a loose thread no one was brave enough to tug. Let them guess. Let them assume. Jessica arrived late, of course, fashionably so, wearing a breezy floral dress and massive sunglasses, like she'd just stepped out of a catalog called Summer with just enough smug. She swept through the picnic tables, kissing cheeks and giving those exaggerated hugs that are more performance than affection. When she got to me, she paused, took in Mark with a curious glance, and gave me the kind of smile you reserve for toddlers trying to tie their own shoes. "Well, look at you," she said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Finally found someone who doesn't mind glitter on everything." There was laughter, the polite kind, the kind that trails off when people aren't sure if it's okay to laugh, but do it anyway to avoid the awkward silence. Our parents chuckled, my mom making a face like she was proud of Jessica for keeping things light, and my dad murmured something about how I'd always been the creative one. I smiled. I always smiled. It was easier than explaining the weight of every eye roll and every backhanded compliment over the years. I poured myself some sweet tea, handed Mark a deviled egg, and let Jessica keep talking. She had no idea she was walking straight into her own eulogy. The first hour of the reunion passed in a haze of barbecued chicken, bad sunscreen, and childhood stories that had been retold so many times they no longer resembled reality. Jessica flitted from group to group, dropping stories about her client relations strategy and pivoting the brand voice like she was still on top of the retail world. I noticed the slight twitch in her jaw every time someone mentioned inflation or small business closures. It was there, just beneath the surface, the unraveling. Then, halfway through the day, right as someone brought out a tray of banana pudding, She stood up near the main picnic table, clinking her fork against a mason jar like she was about to give a toast at a wedding. The chatter quieted. The Bluetooth speaker dropped to background noise. Jessica cleared her throat. I just want to say how grateful I am to see everyone here. It's been a tough couple of years, and I know we've all gone through things. Her voice wavered, just enough to make it seem genuine, but not enough to smudge the makeup she'd clearly applied with surgical precision. And I wanted to be honest with you all, because we're family. She paused again, longer this time. My boutique, it's closing. I'm bankrupt. The rent doubled out of nowhere, and I just couldn't keep up. It's over. Gasps from the crowd, murmurs of sympathy, my mother's hand fluttering to her chest like someone had just told her the queen died. Even my dad looked up from his ribs long enough to frown. Jessica blinked fast, then looked straight at me. And Amanda, I know I've joked about your little hobby, she said, her voice catching, but maybe you were the smart one after all. A hush fell over the tables. I could feel everyone's eyes shifting toward me, waiting for some graceful response, some tearful reconciliation, some sisterly moment of forgiveness and healing. Instead, I took another bite of potato salad, swallowed, and said calmly, "Funny, your new landlord just bought that building." I turned slightly, placing my hand gently on Mark's shoulder. He's right here. The silence that followed was thick and loud, like someone had sucked all the air out of the park and left us in a vacuum of disbelief. Jessica blinked again, but this time it wasn't part of the act. Her eyes darted from me to Mark, then back to me. Her mouth opened, then closed. "What?" she said, but it wasn't a question. It was a panic, a realization unraveling too fast for her to process. "What do you mean your landlord?" And that's when I knew. She had no clue. Not one flicker of suspicion. All that ego, all that control, all those years of holding court over me like I was the family's pet project gone wrong, and she had never once looked over her shoulder to see if I'd been catching up. I didn't say another word. I just looked her in the eye, and I smiled. The silence after Jessica asked that question was deafening, like the kind of pause that happens right before a thunderclap or a car crash, just that thick, airless space where no one breathes and everyone braces. She looked around like someone had stolen something from her right out of her purse, like she couldn't possibly be hearing what she just heard. My mother blinked rapidly, her hand still frozen over her paper plate of coleslaw, while my father narrowed his eyes, not quite putting the pieces together, but knowing enough to know something had just shifted. The picnic smell of grilled burgers and overcooked corn mixed with the sweat of family awkwardness, and nobody said a word, not even the kids who had been playing tag 5 minutes ago. "What do you mean your landlord?" Jessica repeated, her voice higher now, thinner, like a balloon stretching too tight. Is this some kind of joke? I should have felt triumphant right then. I should have smirked, leaned into the drama, pulled out the paperwork like a magician at a birthday party revealing the final trick. But I didn't, because the truth was, I hadn't come here to gloat. I hadn't even planned to say anything. But when she stood up and played victim in front of the same people who'd laughed along with her all those years, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I turned to Mark, who stayed calm, still holding his plate of ribs like he wasn't in the middle of a family detonation. He gave the smallest nod, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were looking. That's all it took. I looked back at Jessica and said, without raising my voice or adding any weight to the words, "I'm the co-owner of the company that owns your building." It was like dropping a match into gasoline. Her expression shifted fast, from confusion to disbelief, then to that specific kind of rage only someone used to being untouchable can feel. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak, and for a moment I saw her without the armor. No boutique. No curated image. No scripted laugh. Just a woman who realized, far too late, that she had underestimated the wrong person. "You can't do that," she said, finally, but it was weak, not even a demand. Just a refusal to accept what was already true. "You can't just buy my life out from under me." I didn't buy your life, I said, shaking my head slightly. I bought the building. Your landlord retired. It was for sale. You didn't see that coming. She blinked hard, her jaw clenching, the heat rising up her neck in blotches. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. My father finally spoke, but all he managed was a low, stunned wait. Amanda, you own the building. I nodded once, nothing dramatic, just confirmation. Mark and I partnered last year. Real estate. Local investments. The shop was just one of many. Jessica laughed then, that panicked kind of laugh that sounds more like a cough. This is insane. You don't even have a real job. You sell glitter notebooks to brides in Ohio. I almost laughed too, but I didn't. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, and yet, somehow, I'm the one signing your lease. You could feel the shift ripple through the picnic like a cold wind. A cousin dropped a soda can. One of the aunts whispered something sharp and fast to her husband. The entire family, for the first time ever, saw the full picture, saw that the joke they'd been in on all these years had suddenly flipped on them, and maybe, just maybe, they hadn't been laughing with Jessica after all. Mark stood then, finished his plate, and without saying a word, tossed it into the trash. I stood too. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't throw a final jab or make some dramatic exit speech. I just picked up my bag, gave my mom a small nod, and walked away with Mark at my side, calm and clean like someone finally leaving a house that had been on fire for decades. We didn't speak until we got back to the car. Mark looked at me, not smiling exactly, but with that knowing glance that said, "You did what you needed to do." I looked out the window at the park, at the balloons still tied to the fence, the folding chairs starting to collapse under the weight of people pretending things hadn't changed. Jessica stood near the grill, arms crossed, head down, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't holding the room together with that artificial charm. I didn't take her boutique. I didn't even take her business. I just bought the silence she never gave me. The thing about people like Jessica is they never really expect the underdog to bite back. They think if they talk loud enough, long enough, no one will notice the cracks underneath. But the quiet ones? The ones they laugh at and overlook? Sometimes we're not just crafting things, we're building the foundation under your feet. Was it revenge? Maybe, maybe not. I didn't need to ruin her to win. I just needed to remind her, gently, that the world doesn't run on curated Instagram posts or charm. It runs on people who keep moving, even when nobody's watching. Especially when nobody's watching. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I caught one last glimpse of my sister, standing still in a world that had suddenly shifted without her. The same world she thought she controlled. Sometimes you don't have to scream to win. You just have to wait until they hear your silence.